Hello and welcome to this Q&A from the Fertility Alliance. And today we're joined by Ciaran Hannington, who's going to tell us a bit about his experiences of fertility issues. So Ciaran, welcome to our Q&A. It's really lovely to have you with us this evening. I wonder if you could take us back to the beginning of your journey and tell us how things started and how you first discovered that things might not be as easy as you'd hoped.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure. Um, but yeah, let's go right back to the beginning. So it's about 13 years ago now. Like time passes very fast sometimes, and I've been telling this story for quite a long time, but it's 13 years now. Um, what happened was me and my wife had been trying to have a baby uh, for around about a year. We were trying before we got married. We were due to get married, so we'd decided we'd like to start a family. And as most people, we assumed there'd be no issues. Um, we were aware that Jen had polycystic ovaries, so that might be an issue if we did need some help, and we were aware of that and comfortable with that. So we tried for around about a year. Then nothing was happening, so we went to the doctors, kind of told them about Jen's situation. No questions were asked about me, so we went down the route of getting treatment for Jen. And just before after about 6 months of tests and other things, it takes a bit of time to get going, doesn't it? Um, yeah, after the tests on Jen, they just said there's a last thought before they gave a Clomid to get her regulating with her cycles a bit better. They said, "Well, we'll just check Ciaran, check there's nothing going on there." And I had my semen analysis, and after about 2 weeks, I got a phone call and went back to the consultant, and they told me that it wasn't good news. I had very low sperm count, motility, morphology. It was it wasn't good. Um, so I had um, another test, another analysis. And 2 weeks later, unsurprisingly, they came back similar. If not, actually, they came back worse. Probably because of all the due to stress that suddenly impacted my body and the cortisol. But they estimated that I had roughly around about 1,500 sperm per milliliter, and less than 1% of that was viable. So like 15 viable sperm. Um, so yeah, I was kind of a rabbit in headlights. Didn't know what to do. Went into quite a long and deep depression. First of all, I was in denial. I I I didn't want to admit that there might be something wrong with my fertility. I had a very manly thought of me. I played rugby. I've been a doorman. I entered the military. I thought I was as manly as could be. This couldn't be happening to me. Um, but after subsequent tests and more analysis, I slowly came to a realization that, yeah, this is a real thing. Um, and kind of fell into a depression, like a really deep one. I always describe my story as two-sided. There was the physical side of it, like the actual journey to have a baby, and then there was the mental side of it, the psychological side of it, which for me was a lot harder, you know, and it was a lot deeper, and I learned a lot more about myself. But if we look at the physical side of things first, we our first cycle uh, took our first cycle took, and we thought, "Oh, this is fantastic. This is how it's supposed to go." And then we quickly, um, sadly, lost the embryo, lost baby, around about 7 weeks, which was our first miscarriage, which was really hard. Um, and then that stirred up a lot of emotions. And then we went to have a second round, and that didn't nothing to it there, which was a frozen round. Um, then we had another fresh one, and that didn't take. But then we did on our next frozen, we had another um, success, but we had another miscarriage. So we were after a fresher frozen, we were looking at our last kind of roll of the dice for the um, last cycle, just because it's expensive and we didn't want to keep putting ourselves through it. Even though we'd had some treatment on the NHS, it still costs money to kind of live the lifestyle that you need to, or you think you need to do the best you can, best chance you've got. Um, yeah, and so if we flip back, we've done that beginning bit of the physical side of things. Now we'll look at the more mental side of things. And like I said, this was a lot harder for me. So we entered that first physical cycle, and I was optimistic, even though I was very upset and obviously processing a lot. I was optimistic that this could work. I think many couples that face, infertility, that first cycle, there is a lot of optimism because you don't know what's coming. The hope is there. The hope stays, but you haven't experienced anything negative at that point. But when it came back that it had been successful and then we lost, it kind of really hit me mentally. That denial became guilt then, and a lot of trauma occurred, and grief, I would say. I was longing for something that I hadn't fully been aware that I really wanted, if that makes sense. Like, I wanted to be a dad, but the penny hadn't dropped that this was in me. Like, I really wanted this. So I slowly became a lot more. I lost Ciaran. Let's put it like that. My wife Jen always says that she lost me. She lost me for a period of time, and I became a lot more unsociable. I lost my sense of humour. I started to pick up bad habits. So I started to drink more, and eat more. All these things that kind of we shouldn't maybe do. Eat the wrong things. I stopped exercising. All these things that I loved. I stopped going to the rugby club and socialising with the lads because I felt like I didn't belong there anymore. And there was a real deep trauma and processing going inside my head. And then we subsequently had those other cycles that were unsuccessful. And each time we had an unsuccessful cycle, I got a little bit deeper into that hole, to the point that I got, I can say this now, but at the time, and for a long time afterwards, I couldn't say it. But I got to the point where I didn't know whether it was worth living anymore. I got that sad. I call it sad, but that depressed. I was that kind of lost. I can't say it was sadness because it was deeper than that. Sadness is something that comes and goes. Where the depression that I felt, I couldn't shift it, and I didn't know how to. I had conversations with Jen in terms of if she felt that she needed to leave me to have a child with someone else, I was comfortable with that. The realities of that, I don't know what would happen. I think it would have been even more traumatic and difficult for me, but I was fully prepared to do that for her. And she was amazing. She stood by my side, and she made it clear that she was willing to stand by me, and she didn't marry me, or she wasn't with me just so we could have children. She was with me because she wanted to be with me. Like, it was me and her, which was kind of the first point of me realizing I've got to try and figure this out. Like, when we had that conversation, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I still felt like I was laying flat on the floor and I just couldn't get up. If anyone ever asks how it feels, that's just how I explain it. Like, you just can't get up. I couldn't physically get myself out of this position and feel better. But unlike my wife, who found it really easy to reach out for support, there was, even going back 13 years ago, on social networks, there was still support out there for women, and she could find it quite easily. It doesn't mean that it was any easier for her, but she could get that external support. But for men, there wasn't anything. And even the stigma of talking to my friends or counsellors or something like that was too difficult, too difficult to navigate. It felt like it would be. But after me and Jen had this conversation, and like I spoke to her about how I really felt, we were at the time we were at Bourne Hall having our treatment, and they had an in-house counsellor therapist. So we signed up to that, and we went along, and it was the best decision I ever made. It was. There's not many moments in my life where I think it changed my life. I think actually having my children, like when they give them to you, that changes your life. But before that, things happen and you just kind of get on with it. But sitting in that therapy room, that counselling room for the first time, I still remember the horrendous awkwardness. And just like, I didn't know what to say. And Jen came in with me for the first one. So she did a bit of the talking, but I kind of just sat there. And it wasn't until the second time I went back and Jen wasn't in the room, I just let it all go. Just let it all go. Everything I was feeling, what the whole journey, how it had made me feel, what I thought my future might look like, all the worries I had about having a child through ICSI, all these extra questions that I had and concerns I had, but also the deep processing that was going on inside my head. And in the end, I sat and I cried for about 20 minutes because I could feel, like even now, I can feel it, that relief in me. And I came out of that second therapy, consultation, and I felt like a new man. I felt like it just been lifted off my shoulders. It was still there, but it was so much lighter, so much lighter. And that gave me the strength and the power to start making the changes I really needed to in my life. Like to actually realize I had more control over this than I perceived I did. When I went in for my first consultation at the fertility clinic, I was distinctly told, like, you need to lose some weight, you need to go on a Mediterranean diet, you need to stop drinking alcohol, you need to do some appropriate exercise, you need to stop your caffeine, all these things. But then it was like handshaking, I was going out the door. And what I realize now is that interaction was my first step on the wrong path because I didn't know what to do. It was like, you've just told me that I'm infertile or low fertility, sub fertility, subfertile, sorry. And you've given me all this information and then you've just sent me out the door. But I now know that was the first step to that quite deep depression I had because I didn't know what to do. So yeah, I came out of the counselling. We had 6 sessions, and I remember questioning whether I should go to the 6th one, the last one, because I felt so much better. I did. I went along. Thank Jackie for everything she'd done for me, and I left. And I was like, right, I'm ready for this. I'd already started putting things in place. And we were really fortunate. We had an 18-month break from any treatment, and then we went back and we had our third and final bit of treatment, and we had 2 embryos put back in. We had at the 7-week scan there was 2, so we were thinking, oh, we're going to have twins. And then we had an additional one at 11 weeks. It was like 12. It was just before our 12 weeks, and it was identified that one of the babies had died at 9 weeks. So it was a bit of a bittersweet thing. Like, we still had one, but we had lost one as well. which was deeply traumatic and difficult, because half of your heart is full of it, because you're like, oh, I've got one, but then half of it, and still to this day, I still wonder what would they have been like. So we lost one of them, but from that pregnancy, my son Sebi was born. You know? And I often tell, he doesn't know this, but I tell Jen, like, he saved my life. Like, he genuinely did. He came at the right time, and I'll ever be grateful to him. And he'll never truly know why, you know. But it was, that pregnancy was difficult because obviously with losing one early, we were worried that we'd also lose the second one. But fortunately, he arrived 4 weeks early and ready to go. So we had, so Sebi was born, and then I was still dealing with the psychological aspect of being infertile, and by that I mean I was actually still having panic attacks, and my self-confidence was still quite low, even though it was on the incline. It wasn't where it was before I kind of had my diagnosis. And that lasted for some time. It took the best part 2 to 3 years for me to be in the position where I'd fully processed everything and was ready to do something to help others. You know, I threw myself into some charity events, which I fully enjoyed. And that was the kind of the start of it all, getting ready to do something to help other people. I've talked briefly about it, but in terms of my preparation for that last cycle, I changed my lifestyle completely. I looked at the limited research that was out there and used my sports and exercise background, my degree, to put together a program for myself and kind of a lifestyle program. Implemented it, and it was successful. And I got to the stage where I was like, well, if I need this, surely other people need this. And that was my first step in terms of going towards what is now NeXYs, I guess, and the Male Fertility Podcast. So I became the Male Fertility PT, and I started helping other men in a similar situation that I was. I found that immensely rewarding. You know, guys, my clients haven't just said they feel better physically, but also mentally, and that's one of the big things. Like I said, there's that two sides of it: the physical and the mental side of things. So that was like my first step into trying to help other people. And then after about a 3-year period, just after we were coming out the first lockdown, me and Jem felt like we hadn't finished our family. I talk about it on my story in the podcast. I kept having this reoccurring dream that I was walking down the beach, and someone was holding my hand, and it was just a small girl, a small blonde-haired girl. And I just kept having it, and me and Jen had this conversation. It was like, well, should we just try one more time? Jen's mum and dad were fantastic. They sorted us out financially for it because we couldn't afford it, but they could see that we were longing for it. But I entered that treatment and journey differently to how I entered the first one, because I was more comfortable with the diagnosis. And we were really fortunate. We had a fresh cycle, which didn't take. And then we had a frozen, and my daughter Enya came from that. It was really rather quick. It was within a year of starting, it kind of rolled out. And I do think to myself, it's some of it maybe because of the way we approached it. Our stress levels were a lot lower. I basically reran the same protocol that I did for myself before, um, and saw drastic improvements in my fertility health. And we were really lucky. Like, Enya was born, um, and yeah, our little family was complete.
Before you spoke to the counsellor, had you ever spoken to any friends or anything like that about how you were feeling at all? Did you, I mean, presumably you told people or not?
Uh, um, we did, but we were very restricted with who we told. And the main reason was when we had that first cycle and it failed. As soon as we were pregnant, we told people we were pregnant, and we found that really difficult to pick up the phone and say, "Oh, it hasn't gone well." So that kind of put us off telling people and talking about it. Um, but I wasn't ready to talk to people about it at all. I tried a few times to talk to my friends, but I didn't say, "Look, I've had these tests, this, and this." It was I'd start talking about the subject and see how they kind of gauged it. And generally, it was just jokes and stuff. So that's what the response was. So I was just like, oh, I didn't feel like it was a safe place to talk. And talking to like the thousands of guys now, it's a similar thing. You know, they're looking for that safe place so they can talk to. Like, one thing I have learned is that we are highly sociable animals, like humans, and if you suddenly feel like you don't belong anywhere, that's what caused my loneliness, and kind of the way I was feeling. It really magnified it, um, made it so much more difficult to interact with anyone because I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Um, so that kind of once Enya was born, I had that feeling of I need to do something, and that's when I reached out to Sean, probably about after maybe 2 years after Enya was born. Like, do you fancy doing this? And fancy a podcast? Let's talk about it. And luckily, he was game. He was like, "Yep, let's go for it." And that's how the Male Fertility podcast started. And then we did the podcast, and then after maybe a year, we realised that we had developed this community of men that were engaging with us, but they also, in some aspects, wanted to engage with each other. So that's where NeXYs came from. We needed to do something else. We needed to take another step to help the guys out there to have somewhere they can go, have somewhere that's safe, where the information they're receiving is correct. It's verified by professionals, and they know what to do, what the process should look like. All these questions that you have, where do I start? Now I've got this. What do I do with this? And then have a group of friends to talk to about it. And that's what we're trying to do with NeXYs is create that community where men don't feel alone. They have that support network, so then they can carry on their lives as normal, but they're getting the support where they need it.
I just wanted to ask you one other thing, which was actually going back to your experience of miscarriage, because one of the things we often hear from men is that they almost feel that they need to be strong for a partner when a miscarriage happens and don't always acknowledge the impact it's had on them. Was that your experience?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I remember feeling like I had a responsibility to stand tall for Jen, and and part of it came down to the fact that I I genuinely felt like we were in this situation because of me. So I had this responsibility, and other guys that I've spoken to have echoed the same. Um, and it's not like that. It shouldn't be like that at all. If guys are feeling that way, talk to your partners, because I guarantee you, your partner is going to turn around and say, "No, we're in this together." You know, yeah, this is the situation, but it's not your fault. It's just the way it is. Um, but yeah, I remember really specifically feeling that responsibility when it's not my responsibility. It's my responsibility to be a good husband and to support my wife where needed. But that's just general life, isn't it? But something I have learned is, and Jen's demonstrated to me, is that when I'm down, she's there for me as well. The pendulum swings both ways. I think when we had those negative pregnancy tests, there was a moment in time when I realized I needed to step up for a short period of time. But I now know that it was also okay for me to show that it affected me, not just to lock it away. I don't think Jen would have appreciated much if I just kind of screamed and ran out the house into some kind of nervous panic or kind of breakdown. But you know, she actually found it comforting to see me once we've kind of sorted out the initial what was going on. But I had emotion about it. That it wasn't just a tick box of right next on to the next. I cared about the situation. Um, but yeah, to answer your question, there was definitely that kind of unconscious responsibility that I felt. I have to do this. When yes, you do, but you do it appropriately, and you need to support yourself as well as the man.
Ciaran, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, and good luck with NeXYs. We very much look forward to working with you on it at the Fertility Alliance and to running groups together. So thank you for everything that you've done and everything that you're still doing.